The sun had barely risen over the rusting skyline of Detroit when Elena Carter pushed open the garage door with her shoulder. She wiped her hands on her jeans, already smudged with engine grease before 8 a.m. At just 22, Elena had inherited her late father's small, cluttered auto shop, one filled with second-hand tools, memories, and half-finished dreams. What made her different wasn't just her skill with machines. It was her obsession with the impossible. And this morning, she stood before her latest challenge, an old, gutted McLaren M840T engine she'd pulled from a junkyard 3 months earlier. Everyone told her it couldn't be done. The Shahid 40T wasn't just any engine, it was the beating heart of a high-performance supercar. Rebuilding it without factory specs, original tools, or support from an engineering team was considered laughable by seasoned professionals. But Elena didn't laugh. She worked. For weeks she studied diagrams, coded calibration software, machined custom parts on borrowed equipment, and tuned the system like a symphony. She didn't have corporate funding or a research facility. She had a dusty garage, her father's, notebooks and relentless determination. The motor, lifeless for years, was starting to breathe again. Word had spread about McLaren's open challenge for independent engineers, an invitation to submit engine builds for review at a California demonstration facility. Engineers from MIT, Stanford, and top automotive schools were submitting KD-heavy concepts and digital simulations. Elena submitted a scanned blueprint hand-drawn on graph paper and a short clip of her engine purring like a lion. The committee almost dismissed it. But something in the sound of that engine made them pause. Against all odds, she was invited to present it in person. She loaded the engine into the back of a rusted pickup, tied it down with old seat belts, and drove across the country by herself. Gas station food, motel showers, and the occasional breakdown couldn't stop her. When she arrived in California, the contrast was sharp. Her faded truck parked between glossy corporate trailers and chrome-covered rigs. No one looked at her twice as she rolled the covered engine into the hangar. She was wearing the same hoodie she'd rebuilt transmissions in. Around her, engineers wore branded polos and held expensive tablets. When her name was called, murmurs ran through the room. A 22-year-old girl from a rundown zip code with a salvaged Mustang and a rebuilt engine. It sounded like a joke. Even the McLaren investors exchanged glances. Elena ignored the stares. She walked to the front, uncovered the engine and connected it to the dyno. No sponsors, no slides, just cold steel, her hands and silence. She turned the key. The engine didn't just start. It sang. The numbers began to climb, surpassing predictions, then outperforming current models. Testers double-checked the readings. It wasn't a fluke. When Charles Langston, billionaire investor and lead backer of McLaren USA, stepped closer, he studied the machine for a long time. His eyes weren't on the display. They were locked on Elena. After the test concluded, she wiped her hands again, waiting. Everyone around her stared now, but not in mockery. They looked stunned. Langston finally extended his hand. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. "In my dad's garage," she said simply. He smiled. "Well, I'd like to build the future in yours." Elena returned to Detroit, expecting things to quiet down. But her garage was never the same again. Within a week of her McLaren demo, her phone buzzed non-stop. Emails from engineers, interview requests from magazines, offers from venture capitalists. But she ignored most of them. What mattered to her wasn't fame. She wanted to keep building. Charles Langston hadn't just shaken her hand. He meant what he said. 2 days after she got home, his team arrived, not with lawyers but with respect. He offered her something no one else had. A partnership that let her stay in control. She didn't move to Silicon Valley or Europe. She stayed right in her late father's garage, which Charles funded to renovate from the ground up. The broken walls were replaced with soundproofed panels. Her Second-hand lathe became a custom CNC station. The rusted lift was replaced with a top-tier hydraulic system. But the spirit of the shop remained. Grease stains on the floor, old trophies on the shelf, and her father's photo above the workbench. Elena started hiring local kids who reminded her of herself. Curious, underfunded, and overlooked, she taught them to weld, code, blueprint, and believe. Her team was small, but passionate. What started as a custom build shop soon became something more. Elena developed a modular engine prototype, lightweight, powerful, and fully adaptable to electric or hybrid formats. Her design impressed not only McLaren, but Ferrari, Porsche, and even the Department of Energy. But she still drove her salvaged Mustang to work. When asked why she didn't trade it in, she smiled. "It still runs like a dream." Journalists called her the garage genius. Students at MIT started quoting her in design papers, but she just kept working. Fame meant nothing if the engines didn't run. 6 months later, Langston invited her to unveil her latest prototype at the International Autotech Expo in New York. Her booth was simple, no flashy displays, just one engine and a live demo. Her team wore black hoodies with their shop name stitched in red. As the engine roared to life, the crowd swarmed. Langston stood at her side but didn't speak. He let her lead. Investors leaned in. Competitors took notes. Journalists gasped as the prototype outperformed current EV benchmarks. By the time the show ended, she had contracts worth millions waiting, but she chose just one, to build for people, not just profit. Boom! The city threw her a parade, small but heartfelt. Kids lined the streets holding cardboard cutouts of engines. She spoke at her old high school, telling girls that their hands were just as capable as anyone else's. "Don't let the noise tell you what you can't do," she said. "Machines don't, and care who's tightening the bolts." After her speech, a young girl approached her, eyes wide. "I want to build engines too," she whispered. Elena knelt down, smiled, and handed her the wrench from her pocket. "Start with this," she said. "It built my future." Langston later told an interviewer that in all his years of business, he'd never met someone who redefined innovation and humility so powerfully. He paused, then added, "She didn't just build an engine. She rebuilt how we see talent." Elena still walks through her garage every morning, touches her father's photo, and gets to work before the sun's up. Because for her, engines aren't about horsepower or torque. They're about purpose. And when the right hands turn the right bolts, even a forgotten garage in Detroit can change the world, one roar at a time.